Dear students, welcome to your first history information video ever. Geir is back to his hometown in Denmark, and I will be teaching you again. So from now on, I will be the only one you'll be talking to. So you don't have to send any messages to Geir anymore. You can all send them to me. Today we will be talking about ancient Greece, so the Greek world. We've already started talking about ancient Greece the last couple of weeks or the last couple of lessons, so you have some knowledge already. But this will be the first time that you hear me talking about ancient Greece. Today we'll be talking about city-states and what are city-states. We'll be talking about colonization, and we will be talking about agora, the agora in a city-state. So what is the word agora? We'll start with city-states. If you look at the word, you can see two words you already know. You'll see city and you'll see states. So a city, we all know, is a stad in Dutch. It's you have a lot of cities. For example, Utrecht is a city. And a state is a some type of country. So then you could say that, for example, you have the United States, which have all these states and staats. So it's a country. But then what is a city-state? When Greece started as a country, they had an agricultural society. And agriculture is farming. We already talked about this when we talked about the farmers and the hunters and gatherers. So they had an agricultural society, and landbouwsamenleving. And that means that every person in the society was a farmer. So all they did was farming. But then Greece developed into an agricultural urban society, which is in Dutch een landbouwstedelijke samenleving. And that means that you have all these other jobs becoming important. So you could be a baker, you could work with iron, you could make baskets, you could weave, whatever you wanted. You could have another job than just being a farmer. So you had the first cities. So urban means cities, stedelijk. And there wasn't just one united country. Greece wasn't one united country. No, they had several, about 150 independent city-states. And they all came up when they started becoming agricultural urban societies. So they went from these small villages with only farmers to these bigger cities. And even cities such as Athens and Sparta, you probably have heard of it, and they were one of the most important city-states back then. So you had about 150. Well, the reason we do call Greece one country or one kingdom, well, not kingdom, but one country, is because they have the same language and the same religion. So they were kind of united in the way that they had the same language, but they were all independent. They all had their own laws, their own government, their own rules, etc. So a city-state is a city. It has the size of a city, like Athens, for example, but it acts like a state. So having its own army, its own rules, its own government. The Greeks called a city-state a polis. So the Greek word for city-state is polis. And if you have multiple city-states, you would say polis. So you have one polis and two polis. So it's the plural. Every polis had its own army and government, like I already told you. So it was like a state. It was like a country on its own. A polis also had an acropolis, and that was a very important place in the city-state. It's a high point in the landscape which could be easily defended. People went there for safety. So if your city-state, because there were quite a lot of wars between the city-states, for example, Athens and Sparta. So if your city-state was being attacked, all the people of the city would go to the acropolis, would go to the high point, and from there they could defend themselves. Because it's a lot easier to defend only a small mountain where you can fight your opponents downwards than if you have to defend the entire city. So it was a place where people would go to stay safe. A lot of the times you had a temple on the acropolis. On the map you can see the two most important city-states, which I already told you. But here on the left you can see Sparta and on the right you can see Athens. And the two kind of battled to see which one was more important, which one was better, who had a better government, etc., etc. Then, colonization. For those of you who have already been to Greece once, you probably know that they have quite a lot of mountains and hills, and they have a lot of rocks. Their earth is very rocky. And if there's one thing that you can't really do on rock is plant crops. So that's the reason why farming was really difficult in the ancient Greece. So agriculture was difficult because it's dry, there's a lot of sun, and you don't have very fertile grounds. So when the population of ancient Greece started growing, they had a problem because they couldn't grow enough food for everyone to survive and to eat. So there was a food shortage. So they had to come up with an idea to make sure that they had enough food for everyone to eat. What they saw as the only solution was emigration. So that meant that people went on expeditions in search of suitable places for new settlements, so suitable places to live. So they went out on their ships and tried to find new land where they could live. So with trade, they could give food back to their mother country, to their city-state, so the people there had more food to eat, but also they could live there and eat the food there, and you had less people in Greece itself needing the food that was grown over there. So in the next 2 centuries, the Mediterranean Sea and the Black Sea were surrounded by Greek colonies. And a colony is kind of a place that is controlled by another country. So, for example, if you have the Netherlands had Suriname as a colony, and Suriname had to listen to the government of the Netherlands, and they kind of belonged to the Netherlands. So ancient Greece was a lot bigger than the Greece that we know nowadays. So it was very powerful back then. And because of this immigration, trade expands. So there's more trade between the colonies and the motherland, so the city-states, which meant that there was more trade overall. And that also meant that the Greek culture could be spread a lot easier. So that's what. Then, last but not least, agora. What is an agora? An agora is a square in the city, and it had several purposes. It was actually the most important space where people would go to. One of the purposes was that it's a commercial center. So that means that the markets were held on this square. So if you wanted to buy food or you wanted to trade something, you would go to the agora. That's the place where people would come together and trade things. The agora was also the social center, so that meant that people would go there to meet up with each other. Of course, they didn't have any cell phones back then, so they needed to go places, to talk to people, to see each other, to see your friends. So if you would go to an agora in ancient Greece, it would be very crowded. A lot of people would be standing around talking and trading with each other. You would see children running around and things like that. And then last, it was also a political center, which meant that people would go there and they would discuss about what the best way to govern a polis was. So the Greek people, they thought that government was very important, and they had all these different types of government because, of course, every city-state had their own government. So they would like to discuss and have these heavy discussions about what was the best way to govern. And so they had democracy, they had monarchy, oligarchy, and they would discuss what was the best way to govern their polis. Because ancient Greece had a lot of very famous philosophers, so people that like to discuss things. And for example, Plato, you might have heard of him, or Socrates. So discussions were very important for the ancient Greeks, and especially about government. That was your first information video about ancient Greece. You'll get a new one next week, which is about, religion. And you'll learn some more about the gods, the ancient Greek gods. For now, I want you to read paragraph 3.1, and I want you to summarize the paragraph. So what is the paragraph about? What is the most important? What do you need to remember? What do you need to remember if you had a test? So not the things that are unimportant, but look at the things that are really important. So what is the red straw through the story about the ancient Greeks in paragraph 3.1? Good luck, and I'll see you next week. Bye.